I wasn't on the committee when it undertook its own inquiry into flooding, so to a certain extent I was playing catch-up when the scrutiny of the bill began. What became apparent was the evidence that we were receiving had a striking resemblance to the evidence the committee had received for its own inquiry. Therefore, many of the recommendations, while maybe not the same, have strong echoes of the committee's previous recommendations on flooding. The Government have taken on board some of the committee's previous recommendations, and I hope that they will act on these recommendations too. I was struck during my first reading of the bill that it could result in a hugely bureaucratic process concentrating on the process of drawing up plans for flood risk management. However, there is not enough focus on the management of these risks and the implementations of the plans. It was argued in evidence that local authorities would implement these plans through their current mechanisms, but this does not go far enough. More specific duties need to be built in to ensure local implementation is prioritised, and I am glad this is going to be looked at, because at worst these plans could sit on the shelf gathering dust until they require to be reviewed. The committee's recommendation in paragraph 39 addresses this by arguing that the bill should be amended to strengthen the link between the duty to reduce flood risk and the implementation of the flood risk management plans. Furthermore, there are no powers in the bill to ensure that the development plans should have any regard to the flood risk management plans. Development plans are probably the most important device we have to manage and reduce flooding. If these plans are not forced to have regard to the flood risk management plans, then the whole exercise is worthless. Again, we received evidence to say that a balance had to be sought between flood risk management and other issues such as economic development and social need. It is true. Forcing development plans to have regard to flood risk management plans would not be detrimental to this balance. It would, however, put flooding on the same footing as those other issues that need to be taken account of when drawing up a development plan. A duty to have regard to the management plans would also ensure that any developments under the development plan in a flood risk area would have to incorporate flood alleviation measures. Very, very briefly,
Mary Scanlon.
Member struck off the list. I appreciate that. Can I ask if you would share my concern that Murray Council's bill of £160 million will be seriously affected by the financial proposals here, and they will be £23 million per year worse off for their flood alleviation schemes?
Rhoda Grant.
Yes, I can agree with Mary's comments there, and indeed a lot of councils that we took evidence of were very concerned about the financing of this and looked maybe that government would hold a pot of money that could help indeed small councils who would have difficulty. Moving swiftly on as time is short, the bill requires that authorities must have regard to the social and economic impacts while carrying out their functions. The committee heard that tools to measure the social and human costs of flooding are not widely available, and that indeed there is no best practice currently in use. It is clear to everyone that witnessed flooding, and indeed Angela Constance made this very clear, that there is a high social and human cost. Press reports show that where there has been major flooding, families are often forced into temporary accommodation for a long period of time. Therefore, the committee recommends in paragraph 59 that the government produce guidance on measuring social and human costs. This needs to be carried out urgently, given that the initial flood risk assessments are required in December 2011, and the guidance needs to be in place in sufficient time to allow SEPA to fulfil their requirements under the bill. Another issue I want to address is deemed planning consent, which is allowed in the bill, and I know the committee had addressed this in their previous report and were glad that this was part of the bill. However, I do have concerns about the consultation process not being properly laid down in the bill. And indeed, the bill may not be the best place to make those provisions, but the bill should allow that ministerial guidance be given on how consultations are carried out for measures that will have deemed planning consent. We currently have complaints about the planning process, and this bill needs to ensure that people engage with the process and are treated as stakeholders as early as possible. Consultation bodies must listen as well as provide information on what they want to do. This is even more important because the lead organisation is not democratically elected. If a council do not hold adequate consultation, the electorate have the last word at the ballot box. It is not the case with an organisation that is directly appointed by government. They will naturally look at the government for a lead rather than their constituents. And that is why the committee is recommending in paragraph 177 that this consultation is in line with best practice and is extremely important. I am confident that the committee's recommendations can improve this bill and ensure that it is something more than a paper exercise, and I would urge the Cabinet Secretary to accept these recommendations in their entirety.